The metal scraping against concrete was the first sound that told me my life was about to change forever. Not the gentle hum of wheels rolling smoothly, but that horrible grinding noise my wheelchair made when the left wheel got stuck. I was dragging myself across the parking lot like some broken toy, my hands already raw and bleeding from gripping the rims too hard. December air cut through my thin jacket like knives, and I could see my breath forming little clouds that disappeared as quickly as my hope was fading. The parking spot where our silver Honda had been 3 hours ago was now just an empty rectangle of asphalt, marked only by an oil stain that looked like a black heart and scattered cigarette butts that my stepfather always flicked out the window. I remember thinking, maybe they just moved the car. Maybe they're testing me. But deep down, in that place where you keep the truths you don't want to acknowledge, I knew. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was deliberate. My name is Helena Chen, and I was 22 years old the day my family threw me away like garbage. But this isn't a story about being a victim. This is a story about what happens when you push someone so far into the darkness that they learn to see in it. This is about revenge, served at exactly the right temperature, ice cold, with a side of public humiliation. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand who these people really are before I tell you how I destroyed them. My accident happened when I was 19. A drunk driver ran a red light and turned my legs into twisted metal and shattered dreams. But honestly, the physical damage was nothing compared to what my family did to me afterward. My mother, Patricia, had remarried 2 years before to Richard Hawthorne, a man who saw my wheelchair as a personal inconvenience rather than his stepdaughter's reality. "We can't keep accommodating her forever," I heard him tell my mother one night through their bedroom door. "She's dragging all of us down. The medical bills, the modifications to the house, the looks we get when we're out in public. It's not fair to Emma." Emma, my perfect half-sister who was born 2 years after the marriage. Golden hair, perfect grades, college scholarships, and 2 functioning legs. Everything I used to be, everything I could never be again. But here's what they didn't know about me during those 3 years of living in their house like an unwanted ghost. While they were having family dinners without setting a place for me, I was sketching. While Richard was complaining about the cost of my medications, I was learning. While Emma was getting praised for her mediocre art projects, I was creating masterpieces on napkins and restaurant receipts. Fashion had always been my language, even before the accident. I could look at someone and see exactly what they needed to feel powerful. I understood fabric like other people understood words. I could take a plain piece of cloth and turn it into something that made people stop on the street and stare. In those 3 years, I taught myself everything. Pattern making from library books, sewing techniques from YouTube videos watched on my cracked phone at 2 a.m, colour theory from stolen moments on the computer when no one was home. I'd even started making connections in the fashion world through online forums, pretending to be an established designer from New York instead of a disabled girl trapped in suburban hell. The day they left me at the mall started like any other humiliation. Emma needed a dress for her college interview. Of course, Daddy's money couldn't be spared for that. Richard announced we were all going shopping as a family bonding experience, which really meant Emma got to pick whatever she wanted while I got pushed around like a shopping cart. "Maybe Helena can wait in the car," my mother suggested when we arrived, not even looking at me. "The wheelchair barely fits in there with all the shopping bags," Richard replied, annoyed. "She can wait by the food court. There are chairs." Chairs. Like I wasn't already sitting in one. But Emma, sweet Emma, had a better idea. "Why don't we just leave her here? She can window shop or whatever. We'll be back in a few hours." The cruelty wasn't in the suggestion. It was in how quickly my mother agreed. "That's actually perfect," Patricia said, her voice bright with relief. "Helena, we'll pick you up around 4, okay? Just try to stay out of trouble." Stay out of trouble, as if trouble was something I went looking for while trapped in a malfunctioning wheelchair. I watched them walk away, Emma linking arms with our mother, Richard's hand protective on both their shoulders. The perfect little family they'd always wanted, finally complete now that they'd disposed of the broken piece. That's when I started making my way to the parking lot, because I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to confirm what I already knew in my heart. The security guard found me there 2 hours later, sitting in that empty parking spot like a discarded mannequin. His name tag said Miguel, and he had kind eyes that reminded me of my grandfather before he died. "Miss, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" I looked up at him, this stranger showing me more kindness than my own family had in months, and I felt something crack open inside my chest. Not break open. Like an egg with something fierce and burning hatching inside. "No," I told him, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "I don't have anyone to call." He helped me inside, bought me hot chocolate from the vending machine, sat with me until the mall closed. When they announced over the intercom that the building was shutting down, Miguel looked at me with genuine concern. "Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" I thought about the house that had never felt like home, the family that had just proven I meant nothing to them, the bed in the room they'd given me that felt more like a storage closet. "Yes," I lied, "they're coming." But they weren't coming. Not that night. Not ever again. I called a taxi with the emergency $20 bill I kept hidden in my phone case and went back to that house one last time. Just long enough to pack my sketch pads, my sewing supplies, and the few pieces of jewellery my grandmother had left me. I left a note on the kitchen counter. "Don't look for me. You won't have to be embarrassed by me anymore." I moved into a studio apartment in the Arts District that night, using my grandmother's wedding ring as collateral for the deposit. It was tiny, barely big enough for my wheelchair to navigate. But it was mine. For the first time in 3 years, I had a space where no one could make me feel like an inconvenience. That's when the real work began. While Richard and Patricia were probably celebrating their freedom from their burden, I was designing, 18 hours a day, fueled by rage and instant coffee and the burning need to prove them wrong. I sketched until my fingers cramped, sewed until my back ached, planned until my eyes burned. I had a vision forming in my mind, as clear and sharp as broken glass. A fashion show, not just any fashion show, the kind that gets written about in magazines, the kind that launches careers and destroys reputations, the kind where I could stand on that runway and show the world exactly what they'd thrown away. But first, I had to survive long enough to make it happen. 3 weeks into my new life, I discovered why they'd really abandoned me that day. And trust me, it had nothing to do with being tired of accommodating my disability. I was working on my third design, a midnight blue evening gown that would later become the centerpiece of my collection. When my phone buzzed, a text from Emma. The first contact from any of them since I'd disappeared. "Mum's been crying for days. She found your note. We looked everywhere for you." I stared at that message for a full minute before typing back, "No, you didn't." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Can we talk? There's something you need to know." That's how I found myself sitting across from my half-sister in a coffee shop downtown, watching her fidget with her engagement ring. Yes, engagement ring. Apparently, a lot had happened in 3 weeks. "Congratulations," I said, nodding toward the diamond. "When's the wedding?" Emma's face crumpled. "That's what I need to tell you about. Derek proposed the day after the mall. His family has money, Helena, real money, but they're very traditional, very image-conscious." The pieces started clicking together like a twisted puzzle. "Let me guess. They don't want a disabled sister-in-law at the wedding photos." "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that." I leaned back in my chair, finally understanding. "You didn't abandon me because you were tired of me. You abandoned me because I was bad for business." Emma's silence was all the confirmation I needed. She started crying then, ugly sobs that attracted stares from other customers. But I felt nothing. No sympathy, no forgiveness. Just a cold, crystalline clarity about who these people really were. "His parents want a small, elegant wedding," she whispered. "They said having someone in a wheelchair would detract from the celebration. And you agreed to that." "I love him, Helena. I can't lose him." I reached across the table and took her hand, my voice gentle as poisoned honey. "You know what, Emma? You're right. Love is the most important thing. I hope you'll be very happy together." She looked up at me with desperate hope. "Does that mean you forgive us? Will you stay away from the wedding?" I smiled. "Oh, sweetie, I wouldn't dream of missing your special day." That was my first lie. I had no intention of going to her wedding. I had something much better planned. See, during those 3 weeks of solitude, I hadn't just been designing clothes. I'd been researching. Emma's fiancé, Derek Ashworth, came from old money, the kind of family that appeared in society pages and donated wings to museums, the kind of people who would die of embarrassment if their perfect family image got tarnished. But I'd also been building something else. My online persona as HC Designs was gaining traction in the fashion world. 3 of my pieces had been featured on influential Instagram accounts. A boutique in Soho wanted to carry my work. And, most importantly, I'd caught the attention of someone who would change everything. Victoria Sterling, editor-in-chief of Metropolitan Fashion magazine. She'd slid into my DMs after seeing my midnight blue gown on a model's Instagram story. "We need to meet," her message said. "Your work has the kind of edge we've been looking for. Are you available for coffee next week?" I spent 2 days teaching myself to walk again for that meeting. The doctors said it might be possible with enough physical therapy, but I'd given up trying after my family made it clear they saw my efforts as attention-seeking. Now, with revenge as my motivation, I pushed through pain that would have made grown men weep. I met Victoria at a chic cafe in Manhattan, my legs shaking from the effort of standing, but standing nonetheless. She was exactly what you'd imagine. Sharp black bob, blood-red lipstick, eyes that could dissect a soul in 30 seconds. "You're younger than I expected," she said, looking me up and down. "And you're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone broken. Your designs have this wounded beauty to them, like they're born from pain. But you..." She paused, taking another sip of her espresso. "You look like someone who's figured out how to weaponize their trauma." I smiled. "Is that a bad thing?" "In this industry, it's everything." That's how I landed my first major feature. Victoria wanted an exclusive on the mysterious designer behind HC Designs, complete with a photo spread and an interview about my inspirational journey from tragedy to triumph. But she wanted more than just pictures and quotes. She wanted a show. "I'm hosting a charity gala next month," she told me. "Fashion's biggest names will be there. If you can put together a small collection, 5 pieces, maybe 6, I'll give you a platform that most designers spend decades trying to reach. 5 pieces, 6 weeks to prepare. It should have been impossible. It would have been impossible for the old Helena, the one who asked permission and apologized for existing. But this new version of me? She was forged in abandonment and tempered by rage. She could do impossible things." I threw myself into the work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. 18-hour days became 20-hour days. I lived on energy drinks and spite, my tiny apartment transforming into a designer's laboratory. Fabric samples covered every surface, sketches papered the walls. My sewing machine ran so constantly the neighbours complained about the noise. But it wasn't just about the clothes. Each piece was a chapter in my story. a weapon in my arsenal. The opening look was inspired by that night in the parking lot, a deconstructed coat that looked elegant from the front but revealed its broken structure from behind. The second piece was about invisibility, a dress that shifted from completely transparent to opaque depending on the angle, representing how my family saw right through me until I became inconvenient. The centerpiece was my midnight blue gown, but I'd transformed it. What had started as a simple evening dress was now a masterpiece of architectural construction, with layers that peeled away to reveal hidden messages embroidered in silver thread. Words like abandoned, forgotten, disposable, but arranged in such a way that they looked like abstract art, unless you knew what to look for. 3 weeks before the show, I made another discovery that changed everything. I was having lunch with Miguel, the security guard who'd found me that night. We'd stayed in touch, and he'd become something like a protective older brother. He was telling me about his daughter's upcoming quinceañera when he mentioned something that made my blood freeze. "You know, I never told you this, but that night I found you at the mall. Your family came back." "What?" "Around 8 o'clock. I was doing my final rounds when I saw that silver Honda circle the parking lot twice. They slowed down where I'd found you, but when they didn't see you there, they just left again. They came back. They came back and saw I was gone and felt, what, relief? Satisfaction that their problem had solved itself?" "Miguel," I said carefully, "are you sure it was them?" "I'm sure. Same license plate I'd memorized in case you were a missing person. Same man driving, same blonde woman in the passenger seat, same young girl in the back." That night, I called Emma. "Tell me about that day at the mall," I said without preamble. "Helena, I don't want to—" "Tell me." A long pause, then quietly, "We came back around 8 to check on you, but you were gone, and we thought maybe you were better off without us." "You thought I was better off, or you were better off?" "Both," she whispered. That's when I knew my revenge needed to be bigger than just a fashion show. It needed to be total, complete, the kind of public humiliation that would follow them for the rest of their lives. I had 6 days to finalise my collection, 3 days to orchestrate the perfect trap, and 1 night to execute the most beautiful revenge in fashion history. Emma's wedding was in 2 weeks. Victoria's gala was in 6 days. Perfect timing. The invitations went out 3 days before Victoria's gala, and they were works of art in themselves. Thick, cream-coloured cardstock with my name embossed in silver foil. "Helena Chen requests the honour of your presence at the debut of HC Designs." Below that, in smaller script, "A celebration of resilience, transformation, and family." I hand-delivered them myself. Richard was washing his car in the driveway when I pulled up in the taxi. His face went through a fascinating series of expressions: surprise, confusion, and then something that looked almost like fear when he saw me walking up the driveway on my own 2 legs. "Helena," he straightened up, dropping the sponge. How are you walking?" "Determination," I said simply, holding out the invitation. "I wanted to personally invite you to my fashion show. All of you." Patricia appeared in the doorway like she'd been watching from the window. Behind her, Emma's pale face floated like a ghost. "Fashion show?" Richard took the invitation, his eyes scanning it quickly. This is really happening." "Metropolitan Fashion Magazine is featuring my work," I said, letting pride colour my voice. "Victoria Sterling herself will be introducing me. It's going to be quite the event." Emma pushed past our mother and walked toward me, her expression unreadable. "Helena, this is amazing. I'm so proud of you." The words should have meant something. A year ago, they would have made me cry with relief. Now, they just sounded hollow, like lines from a script she'd rehearsed. "Thank you," I said. "I really hope you can make it. All of you. It wouldn't be the same without my family there." Of course we'll be there, Patricia said quickly. Too quickly. We wouldn't miss it for the world. I could see the calculation behind her eyes. This was good press for them. The abandoned daughter who rose from the ashes, the supportive family who never gave up on her. They were already rewriting history in their heads? Wonderful, I smiled. It's black tie, by the way. I know how much you all love dressing up for special occasions. As I walked back to the taxi, I heard Emma call after me. Helena, wait! I turned. She was standing in the middle of the driveway, wringing her hands. My wedding is next week, she said. I know things have been complicated between us, but I would really love it if you could come, as my maid of honour. The audacity was breathtaking. After everything they'd done, she wanted me to stand beside her at the altar and smile for the cameras. To be the disabled sister who forgave and forgot, who added just the right touch of inspiration to their perfect love story. I'll think about it, I lied. The night of the gala, I arrived at the venue 2 hours early. The Meridian Hotel's ballroom had been transformed into a runway paradise, white carpet, spotlights positioned with mathematical precision, chairs arranged in perfect rows. Fashion's elite would be sitting in those chairs in less than 2 hours, judging 6 months of my life's work in 6 minutes of walking. Victoria found me in the makeshift backstage area, surrounded by garment bags and my mounting anxiety. How are you feeling? She asked, looking immaculate in a black Armani suit that probably cost more than my apartment's rent. Terrified, I admitted. Good. Terror means you care. Apathy is what kills careers in this business. She paused, studying my face. Your family? They're coming tonight? They said they would. And how do you feel about that? I looked at her for a long moment, wondering how much she knew, how much she'd guessed. Victoria Sterling hadn't built her empire by being naive about human nature. Complicated, I said finally. She nodded. The best art always is. An hour before showtime, I was helping the models into their pieces when my phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Running late, but we'll be there. So excited to see your show. Running late? Of course they were. Even tonight, even when it was supposedly about supporting me, they couldn't be bothered to arrive on time. But I had a surprise for them that would make their tardiness the least of their problems. At exactly 8 p.m, the lights dimmed and Victoria took the stage. She was a master at this, her voice commanding the attention of every person in that room as she spoke about emerging talent and the power of fashion to transform not just how we look, but who we are. Tonight, we celebrate a designer who embodies that transformation, she said. Someone who has taken personal tragedy and alchemized it into something beautiful, powerful, and entirely her own. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Helena Chen and the debut collection of HC Designs. The applause was polite, expectant. They didn't know my story yet. They didn't know what they were about to witness. The first model stepped onto the runway wearing my deconstructed coat, and I heard the sharp intake of breath from the audience. Even in photographs, the piece was striking. In person, under the lights, it was devastating. The model moved with liquid grace, and as she turned at the end of the runway, the back of the coat fell away in carefully planned tatters, revealing the broken structure beneath the elegant facade. The second piece followed, my invisibility dress, its transparent panels catching the light and throwing fractured rainbows across the walls. The murmur from the audience grew louder, more interested. They were starting to understand that this wasn't just pretty clothing. This was art with teeth. By the time the fourth model appeared, the room was electric. Fashion editors were leaning forward in their seats. Photographers were firing off shots like machine guns. And in the back row, partially hidden behind a pillar, I finally saw them. My family had arrived. Richard looked uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo. Patricia kept checking her phone, probably documenting the event for her social media. And Emma was staring at the runway with something that looked like dawning comprehension, because she was smart enough to realize what she was seeing. Every piece in my collection was about them, about abandonment and cruelty and the particular way families can destroy you with love's vocabulary. The models weren't just wearing clothes, they were wearing my pain, transformed into something beautiful and terrible and absolutely unforgiving. The fifth piece was inspired by Emma's engagement, a wedding dress that looked traditional from the front, but revealed itself to be built on a foundation of lies when viewed from any other angle. Hidden beneath the white silk were words embroidered in thread that matched the fabric exactly, invisible unless you knew where to look. Image over love, money over morals, perfection over humanity. But none of that mattered because the final piece was about to walk out. My midnight blue gown, my masterpiece, worn by a model who could have been my twin if I'd never been in that accident. Tall, confident, radiating the kind of power that comes from surviving something that should have destroyed you. As she walked, the layers of the dress began to shift and separate, revealing the hidden messages I'd embroidered in silver thread. But these weren't just random words of pain. They were quotes. Exact quotes from conversations I'd overheard, text messages I'd seen, things my family had said about me when they thought I couldn't hear. She's dragging all of us down. It's not fair to Emma. Maybe she'd be better off without us. Having someone in a wheelchair would detract from the celebration. The audience was reading them now, putting together the story piece by piece. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. Camera flashes exploded like lightning strikes. And in the back row, my family was beginning to understand that this wasn't a fashion show. This was a public execution. The model reached the end of the runway and stopped, turning slowly so every person in that room could read every word. The silence stretched like a held breath until Victoria's voice cut through it. Ladies and gentlemen, the woman behind these extraordinary pieces, Helena Chen. I walked onto that runway on legs that had learned to be strong again, wearing a simple black dress that I'd designed to make me look like exactly what I was, a survivor who'd become a force of nature. The applause was thunderous, but I wasn't looking at the standing ovation or the fashion editors scribbling notes or the photographers capturing my moment of triumph. I was looking at the back row, where my family sat frozen in their seats like deer caught in headlights, finally understanding the magnitude of what they'd done. Finally understanding that their discarded daughter had become their reckoning. The aftermath of the fashion show was everything I dreamed and more. By morning, #Helena Chen Rising was trending worldwide. Fashion Week wanted me for next season. 3 major department stores were fighting over exclusive rights to my collection. And my family? They'd disappeared from the venue before I could even finish my interviews. But that was fine. I knew exactly where to find them. Emma's wedding was in 3 days, and I had one final card to play. The plan came together with the precision of a Swiss watch. You see, during my research into Derek's family, I'd discovered something delicious. His grandmother, Margaret Ashworth, was a patron of the arts with a particular passion for supporting young designers. She'd been at Victoria's gala, sitting in the front row, and had personally congratulated me afterward. "Your work speaks to something profound," she told me, her eyes sharp with intelligence. "I'd love to commission a piece from you." That's how I found myself sitting in the Ashworth family's Park Avenue penthouse, 2 days before the wedding, drinking tea from china that was probably worth more than my entire wardrobe. "I have an unusual request," I told Margaret, my voice carefully modulated. "I'd like to design something for Emma's wedding. A surprise." Margaret's eyebrows rose. "For the bride?" "For myself. You see, I'm Derek's future sister-in-law, and I want to make sure I look appropriate for such an important family occasion." I showed her my sketches, an elegant ensemble that looked perfectly suitable for a wedding guest. Conservative, respectful, everything the Ashworth family would approve of. What I didn't show her were the modifications I'd planned, the little details that would transform it from wedding appropriate to absolutely devastating. "It's lovely," Margaret said. "Though I have to ask, your family seems to have some complicated dynamics. Derek mentioned there had been some estrangement." This was my opening. "There was a misunderstanding," I said carefully. "But family is family. I want Emma to have the perfect wedding day, surrounded by people who love her unconditionally." The lie tasted like honey and poison on my tongue. Margaret smiled and wrote me a check that covered not just the cost of my outfit, but also gave me access to something even more valuable: the wedding guest list. Apparently, she wanted to make sure I was seated appropriately for photographs. Perfect. The morning of Emma's wedding, I received a panicked phone call from Patricia. "Helena, sweetheart, we need to talk," she said, her voice artificially bright. "About the other night." "The fashion show was wonderful, wasn't it?" I interrupted. "Such an amazing response from the press." A pause. "Yes, it was very impressive. But some of the commentary afterward was, well, people are getting the wrong idea about our family dynamics." "Are they?" "You know we love you. You know we've always supported your dreams. Maybe we could have lunch this week and talk about clarifying some things with the media?" Damage control. They wanted to manage the narrative, turn me back into the grateful daughter who'd overcome adversity with their unwavering support. "I'd love to," I said sweetly, "but today's Emma's big day. Nothing else matters but her happiness." "About that," Patricia's voice became cautious. "Given everything that's been in the news, maybe it would be better if you didn't come to the wedding?" I finished. "Oh, Mum, after everything we've been through, you really think I'd miss Emma's special day? I'm already dressed and on my way." I hung up before she could respond. The outfit I designed was a masterpiece of deception. From the front, it looked like exactly what Margaret Ashworth would have chosen for me herself. A sophisticated navy dress with a matching jacket, conservative heels, pearls at my throat. The perfect picture of a loving sister supporting the bride. But fashion, as I'd learned, is all about transformation. And this outfit, it was designed to transform on command. I arrived at the church 30 minutes before the ceremony, slipping in through a side entrance to avoid any pre-wedding confrontations. The venue was stunning. White flowers everywhere, classical music floating through the air, and guests who looked like they'd stepped out of a society magazine. I found my seat in the third row, exactly where Margaret had placed me, and waited. Emma looked beautiful as she walked down the aisle, her dress a confection of silk and lace that probably cost more than most people's cars. Derek stood at the altar beaming, his family arranged in perfect formation like an oil painting of American aristocracy. Richard walked Emma down the aisle, his chest puffed with pride at being part of such an important moment. Patricia dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, playing the role of emotional mother to perfection. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly. Vows were exchanged, rings placed, and when the minister said, "You may kiss the bride," the church erupted in applause. That's when I stood up. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have something I'd like to share with the happy couple." All eyes turned to me as I stepped into the aisle. Emma's face went white. Derek looked confused. The Ashworth family exchanged glances that could have frozen champagne. "I'm Emma's sister," I announced to the room, "and I have a gift for the newlyweds." I reached into my purse and pulled out what looked like a simple remote control. With one click, the jacket of my outfit began to transform. Hidden panels slid away, revealing a second layer beneath that told a very different story. Where there had been conservative navy fabric, there were now photographs, printed onto silk using a technique I developed specifically for this moment. Photos of me sitting alone in that mall parking lot. Photos of the empty space where their car had been. Screenshots of text messages between Emma and Derek's family about keeping me away from their elegant wedding. But the crown jewel was the audio. Another click of my remote and hidden speakers woven into the fabric began playing a recording. Emma's voice crystal clear from our conversation at the coffee shop. His parents want a small, elegant wedding. They said having someone in a wheelchair would detract from the celebration. And you agreed to that. I love him, Helena. I can't lose him. The church was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Guests turned to stare at Emma, who was now openly sobbing. Derek looked like he'd been slapped. His grandmother's face was a mask of aristocratic fury. But I wasn't finished. Emma asked me to be her maid of honour, I continued, my voice projecting to every corner of the church. After abandoning me in a mall parking lot for 4 hours because my disability would embarrass her future in-laws. After my own family decided I was too broken to deserve their love. I turned to face the Ashworth family directly. And you all agreed with her. You decided that your perfect family image was more important than basic human decency. Margaret Ashworth stood up slowly, her face carved from ice. Is this true, Derek? Derek looked between his grandmother and his new wife, trapped between honesty and self-preservation. His silence was answer enough. The wedding is over, Margaret announced. Everyone leave, now! The guests began filing out in shocked whispers, but I wasn't done. I had one final revelation that would ensure this moment lived forever in their memories. Oh, and Emma, I called out as she fled toward the exit. Congratulations on your marriage. I'm sure Derek's family will love having you in their wedding photos. Unlike mine, they actually got to see what kind of person you really are before it was too late. She stopped, turning back with mascara streaming down her face. Helena, please. What? Please forgive you. Please pretend this never happened. Please disappear again so you can all go back to your perfect lives? I smiled. Sorry, sister, but I'm done being invisible. As the church emptied around us, leaving only my shattered family and the ruins of Emma's perfect day, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The girl they'd abandoned in that parking lot was gone. In her place stood someone who'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's simply refusing to stay destroyed. 6 months later, HC Designs was showing at Paris Fashion Week. My story had become legend in the fashion world, the disabled designer who turned her family's cruelty into high art. Emma's marriage lasted exactly 3 weeks before Derek filed for annulment, citing irreconcilable differences and deceptive practices. And me? I bought a penthouse overlooking the mall where they'd left me. Every morning, I have my coffee on the balcony and look down at that parking lot, remembering the girl who sat there in a broken wheelchair, thinking her life was over. She had no idea it was just beginning. My name is Helena Chen, and this is how I learned that the best revenge isn't living well. It's living so spectacularly that your enemies become footnotes in your success story. Sometimes the people who throw you away are just clearing the path for who you're meant to become.